And I'm going to call the meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I entertain a motion to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting.
So moved.
I would like to point out one thing for consideration. It's under new business. It should say a motion to removal of Amy Peck from Rec and Parks Committee. It avoided that, so please add that to the agenda. Other than that, any other considerations or discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of accepting the agenda with that noted change, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Please record the vote as unanimous. Next item on the agenda is public comments. As noted for special meetings, please note that the public comments must be on the topics that are to be discussed under new business. So the floor is now open for public comments. Seeing none, I'll close the floor for public comments and move into the next item on the agenda, and that's new business. A motion for removal of Amy Peck for the Recreation and Parks Advisory Committee. Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. Steve?
Yeah, okay. I'm opposed to the motion. Not going to go back through my email on this. Suffice to say that, best of my knowledge, nobody has even heard what was said on the podcast. I'm yet to have anybody tell me what was said on the podcast that caused the letter to be written. But that aside, we had a similar situation involving two other committee members that was dealt with quietly, professionally, appropriately. And I don't see any particular reason why this couldn't be done the same way. The letter that was sent by Doug came, I think I'm correct about this, less than 24 hours after the letter was sent from council, sort of admonishing Ms. Peck about what she should be doing in the future. To me, this is just nothing more than overkill. And it was done improperly by email. So it seems appropriate that it should be addressed at a board meeting the way our rules and regulations require.
Other discussion, Colette?
Yeah, I'm also opposed to this. It was handled improperly, not by email, by proclamation. There was no request in an email for a vote. There was no vote by email. It was improper from the outset. I think, I'm glad that we had this meeting tonight so that this can be handled in public appropriately. I object to the speculative statements in the letter that council sent to Ms. Peck, stating that she perhaps did certain things or said certain things. I think that's completely improper and unprofessional. I still am waiting for somebody to come up with these voluminous posts on social media that are said to be objectionable. I've asked for them. I sure haven't seen them. Nobody's produced them. And I think aside from that, it's a matter of free speech. There are a lot of things that are said in about public officials and the administration of Ocean Pines, the board of Ocean Pines. Nobody else is getting dealt with in the way that Ms. Peck is vilified and shunned and ostracized and removed from opportunities to be a volunteer. She's been a volunteer for decades. She raised her children while volunteering in the programs that she hopes to help. And I think it's just completely improper. I guess that's all.
Other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the removal of Amy Peck from the Park and Recreations Committee, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
No abstentions. Please record the vote as 4-2. Next item on the agenda, need a discussion on the need to provide additional time for submission of ballots for the current board election. Steve, you brought this item up. Please enlighten us.
Yeah, thank you, Doug. This is sort of triggered because of what has transpired with the late arrival of the ballots to the residents of Ocean Pines, as well as our part-time residents who also vote. The ballots were supposed to be, I believe, mailed out on the 11th. And by the 23rd or 24th of July, they were just starting to come in. People were just admitting that they had, or just saying they had received them. What it's worth, I didn't get mine till the 26th, as I recall. And we're now looking at a deadline of August the 8th. We have the late arrival of the ballots. We've lost almost 2 weeks. We inadvertently had the wrong location for the annual meeting in the enclosure with the ballot. We now have a drop box which opened up today, but there was no mention of the use of a drop box, even though it was discussed when the board went over the contract. There's nothing about the drop box in the enclosure that went out with the ballot, so nobody really knows about it until the press release and the blast and all that goes out. To the best of my knowledge, nobody has received any emails indicating that their ballots have been received out in Washington, which was promised to us as well. And the date has already passed for obtaining replacement ballots. So my thought is, look, our goal here is to have as many legitimate ballots counted as possible. And we're in real danger of not meeting that goal. We've had two, for different reasons, and I'm not going to cast aspersions in one way or the other, but we've had two sort of questionable elections in a row. We now have a third, and it's something that I think we should look to address and avoid. So my thought, frankly, would be to extend the cutoff date to the 17th of August, to have the count done on the 21st of August, and then the annual meeting could go back to about the 26th. It's still before Labor Day. We have enough time to get the word out to everybody. And I think, having looked at it, that there is sufficient authority within our bylaws and within M06 to make this fix. So that would be my suggestion. I'm not absolutely set on the dates. If someone's got a reason why the date should move a little bit, that's fine. But I do think extending this out and giving everybody a better opportunity to get their votes in would be preferable, and something we should do. It's the right thing to do. It's an easy fix. So that's sort of my take.
Other discussion, Colette?
Yeah, and since through no fault of Ocean Pines and through the fault of the contractor, the ballots got sent out a week late. I think it makes sense to push everything back a week to make it, to give us at least the amount of time that the election committee had intended for the public to have the ballots in hand and to be able to look over the information and cast an intelligent vote.
Other discussion?
Yeah, I do have to agree with Colette and also Steve. I do think we should do our due diligence in ensuring that our association members do have an extended period to what it was as far as the delay. I think a week would be suffice and sufficient for that. But also think too that Ocean Pines has been very good as far as advising the membership on ensuring that when they receive their ballots, to mail them quickly. Also, last week I went ahead and dropped mine off at the drop box there, so that's been publicized quite quite well. And we need to continue to do that, just like they did today with another drop as far as advising association members to take care of their ballots and quickly cast and either put them in the mail or put them in the drop box. So, and that will continue through our public relations to make sure that that happens. But I'm in favor as far as extending another week. As far as the other dates, I think that's something that we should come to some sort of a resolution on annual meeting, whether that should be extended outwards. I know it does say in our bylaws that we can do that by coming up with a specific date, making sure we also have enough time where the contractor does the counting of those votes, and whatever time is sufficient for that. And when we do the count, and when that will happen before if we decide to schedule another annual meeting at a different date, when the specific ballot counts will be known to the membership.
Stuart.
Yeah, I agree with my colleagues that we should extend out 1 week, but the dates of the cutoff remain the same. So we can continue to have those ballots that are in the mail before the cutoff date be counted if they went out and they're going to be a little late. I say extend it out to, like, since it was a week late on getting out to the 28th, to the 18th, extend it out to like the 15th, that all ballots postmarked by the 8th get counted. We keep our meeting on the 12th, and then the election can be certified afterwards, and we can have a special meeting and certify it, right?
So I'll answer that as soon as.
Well, I'm just wondering, do we know how many ballots have been received
But we have,
by the,
I'm sorry.
Hold on,
you know,
hold on, I'll take it.
by the contractor? Do we know how many have been dropped at the drop box? Do we have any feel for that?
So two things. Number one, I'm going to rescind Robert's Rules of Order in a minute. To answer your question, it sounds like we've got 3 targets. One is the last date ballots can be postmarked in order to be accepted. Next target is the day in which the ballots are counted. And the third target is the date of the annual meeting. So we have 3 targets that we're looking at. Agreed?
Agree.
Stand by. I'll rescind Robert's Rules of Order in a minute. I will rescind Robert's Rules of Order in a minute. So it looks like we have an opportunity, from what I've heard, is to say, should we allow the cutoff date to be moved back 1 week, where we will accept ballots because of the delay on the front end of 1 week, therefore making it the same period of time, but shifted 1 week. Now, if that is what we agreed to, my question would be, when is the date that the ballots will be counted? We need to make sure that we confirm that not only for ourselves, but with the vendor, right? And then the sort of ancillary tangential thing would be, when are we going to have the annual meeting? Now,
Right.
to your point, the annual, please, George, please.
I'm sorry.
The meeting will stay in order. Thank you. The rules say that the annual meeting, the results of the election can be accepted if there's no quorum for the annual meeting. Okay. So if we decide to move the annual meeting, clearly, we definitely need a quorum. So if we have a quorum at the annual meeting, and if we keep it on the 12th, we can do all the reports from the general manager, our legal team, the audit, and all the other things that go along with our annual meeting. All right. And then choose to accept the results of the election at a special meeting after, assuming we decide to move everything back a week, or we could move the annual meeting back a week and do all of it during the annual meeting. I don't have a strong preference one way or the other, so I'd rather just go with a level of consensus here. But the idea would be, I think we need to make sure that we understand those 3 facets, those 3 dates, and make sure we clarify that specifically so that there's no, well, I thought this or I thought that. No, we clearly state the cutoff date for the ballots being mailed is this date. The count will be conducted on this date. The annual meeting will be conducted on this date. Now I'm going to rescind Robert's Rules of Order, and I'm going to ask, now we have the ability to talk to Tom Piatti. Tom, from your perspective, what would you recommend, hearing this discussion that we've had so far? Is there anything there that would be, sort of out of order or problematic with regard to the current relationship with the vendor and the whole process in and of itself?
Okay, well, what I can tell you is that under contract, those election materials were to go out on the 11th, and they did not. They went out on actually, the 18th, they were processed to the post office, but they didn't go out till the 19th. And so 7,781 ballots went out of people who are eligible to vote. About 800 were ineligible. About 4,225 came to Ocean Pines, batched to 21811 at 49.8 cents per. So what we're experiencing in the elections committee, emails through telephone calls, is that residents here have yet to receive their ballots, and we don't understand why. It could be a local distribution issue, but what we would like you to do is extend everything at least 7 days, 7 or 8 days. Both the due date for ballots at the election trust and the count, and certainly the annual meeting, it should go hand in hand. I will tell you that yesterday, George and I took 162 ballots from the ballot box to FedEx. They went out at 1:10 in the afternoon, and they arrived in election trust at 11:49 today. So we know that that process is working. You have to understand that the timeline to put ballots in Ocean Pines post office box to election trust is at least 5 business days. Do not count Sunday. So they may be receiving them today at the post office in actually it's in Seattle, but then they've got to be run through the meter because you got to pay for them. Then they're taken to election trust. Once they're scanned by election trust, that triggers the email back to those who had an email on file. That hasn't happened yet. So we know that there's a delay, and the entire elections committee agrees that we should extend this to give more time to our members the ability to vote.
Other discussion? Steve and then Colette.
Yeah, I don't want to leave, Rick, I don't want to leave anybody with a bad impression. I have no problem with getting the word out, what has been done over the last couple of weeks, what I think needs to continue to be done. I think it's fair to say we're playing catch up, but I mean, I don't have any problem with that side of it. And Doug, I do agree with your sort of analysis of what we need to do. I'm a little concerned about the idea of fixing, of changing the other dates, but not moving the due date, because that still leaves us pretty much at the mercy of the Postal Service and Tom's description of what goes through. I mean, my thought is if the cutoff date is the 10th, you could have someone mailing a ballot in on the 6th, 7th, 8th in good order. And because of the cutoff date is the 10th, it won't get counted. And it's a legitimate ballot. I mean, it should be counted. So my view would be we should push everything back. I will add one other thing, and that is not to diminish the importance of the annual meeting, but it is possible for the board to certify the election absent an annual meeting. So we have a couple of ways.
Right.
That was the issue about the quorum.
Yeah, right. We have a couple of ways to skin the cat. But yeah, my view, I would think it's at least a minimum of 7 days. We don't include Sunday because you almost want to go 8 days and then put the ballot count out a few more days just to make sure election trust has everything in hand and they're ready to go. That would be my suggestion.
Okay, point of order. I'm going to reinstate Robert's Rules of Order. Other discussion, Colette?
Yeah, I guess I'm concerned about fixing that date at all, considering that we have people who still haven't received their ballots. I know that I mailed my ballot by US mail a week ago. I still haven't gotten any email that it's been scanned or received. That's a hell of a long time. To your point about using postmark as any index of anything, these don't get postmarked. These are bulk mailings. There are no postmarks. So I'm just really, I don't think that we're ready to fix dates until we know that there are people who should be getting their ballots, who have received their ballots. And that we're not continuing to hear from people that they haven't gotten their ballots yet, if they're eligible voters. Who knows how long it takes for people to get their ballots.
Other discussion? So the thought here is that right now we're contemplating the idea of a 7-day shift. In other words, move the date for the, lack of a better term, the receipt of the email. Okay, the date it was mailed / postmark / put in bulk mail, whatever you want to do, from the 10th to the 17th, correct? I'm sorry, I don't have the dates.
That's all right. I've written it down like 6 times.
It's the 8th.
The
All right, so the ballot should.
deadline is the 8th.
All right,
At
the
4
deadline to have mailed the ballot is the 8th, correct?
By 4 o'clock. Has to be received
It was received on.
Receive.
at Election Trust
All right.
by 4 o'clock on the 8th.
So absent any further discussion, we can get into more detail right now. One approach would be move that back to the 15th, all right? All right, and when that happens, I look at the cascade effect, all right? What happens now? When are we going to count the votes, all right? The vendor has a date in mind. If we adjust the date of the cutoff, clearly to me, unless I'm missing something, I'll rescind Robert's rules again. Unless I'm missing something that will that not affect the date when they can count the votes?
Yes.
So I'm making, I think is a reasonable assumption, but I'd want some clarification that if we move the date back to the 15th, then the date that they're going to count the votes obviously would be 7 days from their original date, which again, I'm going to rescind Robert's rules. Tom, when is,
Already talked to them about that.
And they have said that they will, of course, go along with us. We still haven't found out why the delay happened. It could have been a machine that broke down. It could be a
so,
heart attack. It could have been,
Well, we don't know that, but.
we don't know what the
The
reason
cutoff
is
to
yet.
the 15th. The count on the 17th, which is a Thursday. We actually adjusted these dates because in the past, the count would be on the Friday and the annual meeting would be on a Saturday. We added a day in there just in case because we're dealing with a company 3,000 miles away. But they're actually doing a good job other than the 8-day delay. Now, Colette's statement that she hasn't received an email is that it's too early. Like I said, if you sent it out last Tuesday or Wednesday, by the time it gets out there, it's metered and it gets received by Election Trust and they run it through the system. You should expect an email either tomorrow or Thursday. And that is late. We're not satisfied with this issue. So hold on, George. So what we're experiencing is people who have said, who have written us and said, okay, I haven't got my ballot. We go back to them and said they were late, but you should receive them on the 25th or 26th. People have called us back and said, oh, I got it. It was in my neighbor's mailbox and they just delivered it to me. There's so many small, occurrences. So what we have been doing is if we get a notification that I haven't got my ballot, we go out to Election Trust, tell them to send another package. It comes priority mail, which is 1 to 3 days, not 5 days. And we're also telling the people, once you receive your packet, fill out your ballot, put it in the envelope and bring it to the police department and drop it in. And that seems to be working.
Okay.
So there you have it.
I guess my question then would be, what about the folks that don't live here full time?
They probably get
Well,
the mail faster. People from Pennsylvania, Virginia, get their mail faster there, according to the post office.
Well,
And we get it here on Eastern
okay,
Shore.
let me answer that question. Well, as soon as they scan the envelopes, it creates a report back to us the same day. We haven't gotten that report yet because they haven't gotten any ballots up there. So give us 2 more days and then we can look to see on that roster, there could be 1,500 names on there of the areas that they live in, whether it be Pennsylvania, they're, still in Florida or whatever. We just do not have enough information right now to give you an answer.
okay, all right. I'm going to reinstate Robert's rules. All right, wait a minute. One more, George, one more thing before I reinstate Robert's rules. Go ahead.
Okay. What was not brought up, according to the post office, and I checked this out, is that on business return mail, there's a 2-day longer for the transmission, whether it is from here to Salisbury or whether it's from here to Washington. It's 2 days it takes them because they then have to scan it and then charge us for that. So it's an automatic 2-day
Okay.
extra. So that is the reason why
Right.
Ms. Horn has not received, or I haven't received my email either. But knowing that it was that 2-day extra,
Right.
that is well known.
All right, I'm going to reinstate Robert's rules. Steve,
Yeah, I think all this is helpful. I do think it sort of argues that we should look a little bit further out than just 7 days. Tom's committee won't have any information for at least 2 more days. And I'll go back to what I said earlier, which is someone mails their ballot up to the appropriate date. I'd like to give election trust, in light of the USPS and other considerations, a few more days just to make sure they've got all the appropriate ballots before they do the count. So I would say rather than have on the current schedule, you have the cutoff date is 4 o'clock on the 8th, you have the count on the 10th. What I was suggesting was the cutoff date would be the 17th, the count would be the 21st, which I think is a Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken.
21st of August is a Monday.
Is a Monday.
Monday.
Okay, I apologize. But there's at least a little bit more time to make sure all the appropriate legitimate ballots are in hand.
Stuart.
Yeah, since we lost a week on the initial outset of the mailing, I think it's appropriate to push it a week ahead. So instead of it being the 8th, make it the 15th, count on the 17th. That's the end of it.
Lost more than a week.
Well, it was supposed to be mailed on the 11th. We got it. They went out a week late. So if we push it up a week, we're good.
Yeah, but people didn't get it
People
until the
still haven't
23rd, 24th, and 25th. If you just look on what people were telling you or on social media, whatever, those were the dates the ballots were being received.
So we're looking at what?
Yeah, the other thing that I'm not comfortable with is taking the word of election trust about anything. They've already broken their contract. They violated the dates. It's fuzzy as to when the last of these ballots were mailed out. There are people who still haven't received them. I have no confidence in their word and their promises because they failed us already. So I would say at minimum, we should push it out to the deadline for receipt of ballots being the 17th, end of business on the 17th, and the count on the 21st. But like I said earlier, I'm not sure we're ready to make that decision. Tom is telling us in a couple of days he's going to know more, but we don't know for sure that in a couple of days he's going to know more. We're dependent upon a company that's already failed us. So I
Noted.
think we ought to table this
All right,
and revisit it when we have the facts. that we
All right.
need.
stand by. I'm going to rescind Robert's rules of order one more time because another committee member.
Thank you, Doug. I spent probably the most time of the committee on the phone last week with probably 60 or 70 folks and explained the process and whatever. We made a lot of referrals to the help desk to get duplicate ballots. A couple of them were wait and see, give it a couple of days. They did call back and say, yes, they received their ballots. However, they received their ballots. Let me look at the calendar again. The 26th, 27th, the 29th. So that to me, it showed me that it wasn't just a 7 or 8 day delay from the 11th. It was more like almost 12 days.
Did that data sampling include people that both lived here in the Pines and did not live here in the Pines as
As a
well?
matter of fact, which was very strange, we had a person in Howard County, a person in Pennsylvania, and one in Virginia that got their ballot that was forwarded to them to their new address from their old address, and they were all out of the area. The ballot that went to Pennsylvania was forwarded to them here in the Pines. The one that was in Howard County was forwarded here before anybody else even got a ballot. So our distribution on the Eastern Shore is whacked. So I'm just suggesting to really look at the real numbers of when these things started to hit. And I would suggest, based on the phone calls that we received, it was the, where is it again? The 26th, which is a Thursday, and then Friday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, 26, 27, 28 is when they really started to get in the system. So I would recommend, based on Steve's comment and Ms. Horn's comment, is to really, go ahead and say the 22nd is 2 weeks extension from the 8th, and make the count on the 24th and the meeting on the 26th, and push the advertisement from every source we can over the next week and a half. If you don't have a ballot drop dead date this coming weekend, call the help desk, get a duplicate, because it's a 3-day turnaround for that priority mail duplicate, and then drop it off the PD. We will be covered for anybody that doesn't have a ballot. And I agree that the extension, not of a week, should be really 2 weeks.
Right.
That's just based on our phone conversation with our residents.
Noted and appreciated. I'm going to reinstate Robert's rules of the discussion. So it sounds to me like conceptually, we should certainly change these dates, at least, the very least, for the cutoff and for the count. Okay. So the other question remains is, should we be changing the date of the annual meeting as well? I like the idea of perhaps, since we're in a little bit of a fluid situation, I would offer that to take up on what Colette said, and that would be, why don't we give the elections committee a couple of more days, all right, to get that data. And because I think it would help to influence us whether or not we want to push it back 1 week or 2 weeks. I will go on record as saying I think it's the proper thing to do to push it back at least a week, if not more. And if the data lends us to make that decision to push it back more than a week, we should certainly do that. So I'm open for any further discussion on that approach. Tabling, clearly we'll need to have another meeting prior to making a final decision on the dates if everybody is comfortable with that discussion. Yeah. Steve.
My concern, frankly, is this is not a reflection on Tom and the committee. We're dependent upon Election Trust to give us not just some data, but data sufficient for us to make a reliable decision. In the meantime, everyone is sort of, for lack of a better term, sitting around twiddling their thumbs. I'd be more comfortable at least laying out a date now, and then saying, depending on if the data shows less than adequate performance, we may have to revisit it. But if the data is sufficient to indicate that the dates we changed to are okay, then we know we're on stronger ground. But we have the problem of waiting 2 more days, and then which would get us to Thursday or Friday. We're then looking at the weekend to meet. I mean, I don't care. You tell me when to be here, I'll be here. But I'm just saying, I think we'd be smarter to have a date set. And Tom, correct me, may I ask a question?
I will rescind Robert's rules of order. Go ahead.
I'm assuming we'll get, so once the data starts to come in, you'll be getting updates on a continuous basis?
Yes, daily. It's an Excel spreadsheet that comes into us.
That being the case, if the committee feels, well, we got to push it back a little bit further, then we could meet to do it. But I would think we should at least have a date that we can tell. We're losing 2 or 3 more days of publicity to tell people that we're trying to fix the problem. And that's my concern.
And
Monica.
I agree that.
I'm sorry, Robert's rules are reinstated. Monica.
Oh, thank you. I think we should look at a 2-week delay rather than kind of willy-nilly back and forth. I think consensus seems to be from the committee people and all, if we, push things back 2 weeks, we should be in good shape to take that forward versus saying, well, let's consider a week and then we'll meet again. No, let's get this information out to the public and say, we're going to delay this 2 weeks. And be consistent. And it seems to me, everybody feels comfortable with that 2 week period.
Yeah.
Versus maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks.
Thank you, Rick.
Yeah, I have to agree with Tom. He brought out some very legitimate points on, the tracking of the ballots and when people are receiving them. And, one thing that we don't want to do is continually giving dates and changing dates. I think that having the thought of what Tom mentioned as far as the delay of a 2 week and then come up with a hard date of whatever the date you said, the 20 something, and then have that count a few days later and then having followed on by an annual meeting. I think that would be more than sufficient amount of time to right this ship, making sure that we have the most ballots that are received, correct any issues of people not receiving their ballots, and being able to get them replacement ballots back to them and then back to us. And it'll give them time as far as for the mailings. And if those folks see those ballots, they can definitely have the drop box that's available. And with the assistance of our PR to making sure that there's continuous PR regarding the drop box, mailing of the ballots, getting people ahead of it, not to delay it. There are people that are out there that will sit on it, forget about it, human nature, but make sure that they're reminded that they need to get their ballots in. And if they don't, then they're going to miss out on even that deadline.
All right, so Stuart, 1 second. So and Colette, you were next. The risk, it sounds like, and while I certainly don't want to suggest the discussion is over, it sounds to me like, at least at this point in the discussion, the consensus would be to move all 3 dates back 2 weeks. In other words, move the, all right, hold on. So the idea of moving the cutoff date, the count date, and the annual meeting. All right, so that's where we are right now, possibly. All right, Colette, you were next, and then Stuart.
Yeah, and building on what Rick said, that we don't want to be moving dates around and
Right.
changing dates. I don't think we need to make a decision today. We're going to get more information in 2 days,
Mhm.
we think. That information doesn't come, then, these speculations that we've made today that 2 weeks is going to be sufficient are baseless. And so I think we ought to wait the 2 days, see if we get the confirmation from Election Trust that things are on track for a week delay or whatever it ends up. And, we can always meet again and set a date that we can live with. I also would hope you're going to have discussion about the annual meeting date, not just push that back based on everything else being pushed back. Is that your plan?
Well, the idea is it's open at this point because because we can disjoin that.
Yeah.
The count,
And I would like
the
to,
delivery date or the cutoff date and the count date can be disjointed from the annual meeting date if that's what we decide.
yes.
All right, so the idea would
I
be,
just want to be clear.
we can still accept,
Whatever we decide to do about the deadline
Right.
for receiving ballots and counting is independent of. the
correct.
decision.
I would do that.
Yeah.
Who's next? Stuart.
Yeah. Listening to our good friends on the election committee, they've done an amazing job trying to, under some difficult situations here. I think we should take the recommendation and move the due date to the 22nd, count on the 24th. And listen, we can talk about the meeting being on the 26th or keeping it on the 12th. That's irrelevant. Whatever the consensus is here, I'll go with it. But the actual, we want to make sure everybody's voice is heard. The only way to do that is to extend it out. The extra data that we might get in a couple of days is going to change the fact that Tom told me he had a 2-day delay on return mail. So I think that I can get behind a due date at the 22nd with the count on the 24th.
Mhm.
I can get behind that.
In sort of to Steve's point, the idea of 2 more days or 3 more days worth of sort of uncertainty, throughout the community. I don't know how much that's worth, but at the very least, we do certainly need to take action. While I am agreeing that we can't be willy-nilly about the dates, I don't know that the information that we're going to get from them would automatically change it from 7 days to 14 days. In other words, 14 days is very risk averse in my opinion.
Right.
You push it out 14 days. We may get data back in 2 days and say, well, you could have done it in 7, but you know what? There was no risk association pushing it back to 14 days.
Exactly.
Because anybody that might have been, lost in transition or whatever is accounted for by those 7 days. And like I said, I don't see any real risk to the association. Quite frankly, I see benefit to the association in the sense that now reduction absurdum, oh, well, why don't we just make it October? Well, no, that's not going to work either. We have to set some date. So the idea of when I'm listening to this, all the different concerns with proximity, bulk mailing charges, et cetera, that are all parts of that process. To me, I think a happy medium, actually an effective approach would be to do the 14 days for both the count and the cutoff. So, and that's what I would propose for consideration. The other side of it would be, so if that's what we're thinking, what do we do with the annual meeting? All right, and that's really what we have to get our heads around. Colette.
My concern is not that this extra information we get in 2 days is going to tell us to shorten the time. I'm concerned that it would tell us to lengthen it beyond 2 weeks. I think Tom's data is great data. That's the only data we have that really tells us anything definitive. But there's more data to be had that's going to tell us a heck of a lot more in, we think, a day or two. That day or two may end up being a day, 3 days or 4 days. I'm just, I think 2 weeks sounds like a real risk averse date, but I'm not sure that's enough.
Well,
It's going to turn out to be enough.
Point taken. At some point you got to drive a stake in the ground, and that's why use reduction absurdum. We'll make it December. At some point, one of the things we should be advising the committee to do would be to please reach out to the vendor that we contracted with, share our concerns. Now, we can't, as a board, can't do that because we're not going to be involved in the election. But there's nothing that says we can't give advice to the elections committee to say, we've adjusted our dates based on the current set of circumstances. We need some verification, some commitment by you that you'll be able to meet these dates. And I don't want to hear the fact that you had some kind of problem. One of the reasons we hired you is because you had experience in addressing these kinds of issues from your office in Washington State, across the country. So I don't want to hear that you had some unexpected delay. Not buying it. I think if you hold them to a date, you make them commit to that date, that puts enough pressure on them, from a contractual agreement to make them deliver that. That's just my personal opinion. Wait, Steve had his hand up and then.
If I may, there is a potential fail-safe as well, and that is if the data that Tom and the committee collect, not just the first day, but over the next as they get these daily reports, if they find we still have problems, they can come back to us and explain, this is, we might have, I'm not saying it should, but we might have to do something again, but at least we know, I think using your description, we are risk adverse by going out 14 days and dealing with it that way. But I would expect, and I'm sure committee would do it, they would tell us, we got more problems, we need a little bit more time, or however it gets addressed. But we do have that capability if we have a big enough cushion to work with.
Right. Go ahead.
Again, we're dependent upon these election trust people giving us solid information. They haven't given us solid information yet. They violated the contract. They violated their promises, their commitments. To ask them for another commitment is setting ourselves up for disappointment and failure. And, I believe that when we have something in hand, that is information that we can make a decision on. We don't have that at hand. We will have it in hand, according to Tom, in a couple of days. Could be 2 days, could be 4 days. But I don't think we need to make a decision today. This meeting would not have happened tonight had Steve not brought it up and I seconded it. It could have been tomorrow. It could have been the next day. It could have been 2 or 3 days out. What is the magic of today for making this decision? I know it inconveniences people to have to come back possibly on the weekend, but I don't want us to be diddly farting around, changing our mind and demonstrating to the association that this is another failed election already before the votes are even counted.
So,
Well, I'm going to disagree with you, Colette, as we do on quite a few occasions. I think that moving this out 14 days will give the election trust the time to get this thing done. I have full confidence in our committee. I think you draw a line in the sand. It's the 22nd, the count on the 24th, you put them on notice. I can't tell you that this is a failed election process. We just had an issue with the outlay of the mailing that went out. The rest of it, I expect to run well. I expect that this is all they do. They run elections nationally, different townships, different HOAs. I've researched this firm. They do it nationally. So I have all the confidence that from this point forward, things will run the right way. It was just an issue getting the mailing out initially. So we put this back 2 weeks. You tell everybody in our town that they have to postmark they have to be received in Washington by the 22nd. Count back 8 days and put it in the mail. At some point, people are adults. You're going to have your ballot in your hand. You know, you can't handhold them to tell them you gotta give them timelines. You have to put it down and say this, and this. I say move it out 2 weeks to the 22nd. Count on the 24th, and if everybody's with this at some point, make the decision, do the meeting on the 26th. That's it.
other discussion? All right, I'll rescind Robert's rules. John?
Thank you, Doug. And look, I get all this and everything just from operations. We do have a lot of ads. We have a lot of postings with the date. I'm going to call back and we don't have a date. We could still call back ads where we're listing the date of the annual meeting.
Mhm.
But we got to do it within the next day.
Another,
Based on what I'm hearing, I'm calling them back unless you tell me something different.
okay.
Yeah.
Noted. So that's an important aspect
That's
of,
the announcement of the.
Annual meeting.
yeah.
I don't see why we need to change that date.
Okay, well
I
then,
think we still have it.
so again, first of all, let me pose a question. Do we believe clearly that the date of the annual meeting is independent of the date the
I agree.
cutoff?
I agree.
And-
I agree.
So we agree on that.
Yep,
Yeah.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
So is there consensus that we continue to have the annual meeting on the 12th?
I'm fine with it.
I agree.
I can get behind that.
I agree.
All right,
Yep.
right, because that annual meeting is a membership meeting and it clearly from the agenda, all right, the only thing we would have to do is not accept the validation of the election results from the election committee. So we will need to change the agenda.
Can I just make one observation and
Steve?
uh,
Robert's rules are reinstated.
Doug, you're going to be doing on the hot seat. I think it's possible that a number of people will come to the annual meeting and complain,
Mhm.
bitch,
Sure.
culminate, whatever,
Sure.
about the election.
Right.
And I assume we'll let them do that. I mean, I think you got to give them
I've been around long enough. Yes, I will be the target. You know what?
that understanding. I have no problem.
Yeah, you know,
I-
the same people will also say that if we move the ballot back 2 weeks, that we're manipulating the election. That'll happen as well.
Yeah, yeah.
I've been around long enough, and you just can't avoid that line of thinking and those comments. They don't bother me. Okay? The idea is we have to conduct our business. We're doing the best we can, understanding these circumstances. We're making what I think is a calculated change in these dates based on the circumstances we're analyzing, period. Okay? And if somebody gets upset at the annual meeting, well, that's their right. I have no problem with that. But at the end of the day, the election is the most important part of this, and we have to get that right. To me, if anybody, sort of disagrees with me, that's fine. But if I were to prioritize, I would much rather have a successful election, than a annual meeting where people are happy because they heard the results, and we rush to judgment on that. That just doesn't do it for me.
Good enough.
All right. So, all right. So can we agree that we'll continue to have the annual meeting on the 12th?
Agree.
Okay.
Agreed.
As noted.
That's great.
All right.
Agreed.
All right. I will rescind Robert's rules. Bruce.
Just want to make a comment on that because there is some mandatory language in the bylaws about the
Notification.
validation of the election occurring at the annual meeting. That's troublesome for that approach.
Mhm.
You get around that by not having the annual meeting on the noted date and pushing the annual meeting. Session 4.2. Because if the annual meeting of the members is not held on the date designated in the notice of the meeting due to lack of quorum or for any other reason, then the board of directors shall hold a special meeting to receive the voting results from the elections committee and validate the election of directors.
So could any other reason being, or could any other reason be the fact that the contractor that was brought in to address the count has not been finalized? That would be another reason.
In my opinion, you can, on that basis, push the annual meeting, reschedule the annual meeting. And then if the annual meeting is not occurring on the date designated in the
Gotcha.
notice, that triggers the ability.
I got it.
All right.
Gotcha. I got it.
So that is a much less risk position.
I mean,
It's basically risk avoidance,
as far as it's the.
because you don't have to define that
Close to compliance.
nebulous term called other.
Yeah, if you want to be as close to compliant with the bylaws as you can, my recommendation would be push the annual meeting and then have a special meeting same day for the special meeting of the board, for the board to receive the voting results from the elections committee and validate the election of directors.
Okay,
It
so,
all.
so in essence, the conversation we had probably 30 minutes ago about sort of decoupling the annual meeting from the validation of the election results really is improper, is that it needed to be done. Although one could argue that other, other than a quorum, other circumstances could dictate that the,
I think there's some flexibility way in here, but the most compliant thing to do,
Right.
I think.
it's the most risk averse approach.
Council.
Then in
Which
one
means-
additional point, and maybe Colette's going to say this, but if you're going to push the annual meeting, you got to do it far enough out so that you can get the 15-day notice out.
Right, there's a notification issue, sure.
Okay, I'm in.
And you can revise the agenda if you felt it
Right.
necessary.
Well, so, but you wouldn't need to revise the agenda. Well, yes, you would if we didn't have the results from election trust.
You can do a revised agenda in the new notice. Of course, you're not going to have the ballots and all that in the package that goes out, but that's okay. My view.
So notice has to be out by the 11th. If we move to the 26th.
Right.
Right.
All right, Colette, I'm going to restate.
I was just gonna say, if we push everything out 2 weeks, that kind of deals
Solve
with
for
it,
that.
right?
Okay,
But
so based on this discussion, we're kind of,
that 2 weeks ends up to not be enough, then we got another problem. So I'm just saying,
I think 2 weeks.
maybe we gotta wait 2 days.
so the option here is that I want to be definitive. I mean, we've spent enough time on this issue. I think we could be comfortable with saying, based on these discussions, we're going to revise the dates. These are the 3 dates, the cutoff date for receiving, the count date, and the annual meeting date, okay? And then at some point in those, in the next, I don't know, pick it up, well, 2 days, according to Tom, we'll have some more data, but say the following, next week, we'll have even more data. If we feel that, we're getting, the sense that election trust isn't going to get us where we need to be, we can always do what council has suggested, and that is, we'll still hold the meeting on the 26th, 27th, and then have another meeting to,
Special meeting of the board.
a special meeting to accept the results of the elections from the elections committee.
I'm fine with it.
All right, so I guess, let me summarize real quick. Stuart, go ahead for
Do
it.
we need a motion for this?
We can, quite frankly, because we approved the agenda already, agendas are not supposed to be, changed after a meeting is started. Quite frankly, we'll have to have another one. I don't want to get in trouble with, parliamentary procedures with regard to changing, an agenda item after the agenda has been approved. I'll look to council to say, are we running any risk if I violate standard protocol for Robert's Rules of Order?
If you reach agreement here as to what to do, then you can, by unanimous
Consent, we'll cover it.
without a meeting.
Okay. Okay. So for the record, since it's being recorded, let's summarize again. So what we're saying now is, let's be very clear on this. And Stuart, could you please, as a secretary, please make sure we've noted all this. We're going to change the due date to the 15th? No, I'm sorry, the
22nd.
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 Okay. And the count date will be the 24th. All right, and the annual meeting will be the 26th. Okay, that's what we are agreeing to at this point, okay? And then, just so the public knows, unless something changes, we will have, assuming a unanimous consent, and please, I'd like to think we're gonna have unanimous consent on this based on the time we've got invested so far. That we'd have unanimous consent on an email vote, and we'll bring up a motion to, for this particular information that we just did, and then the dates, to change the dates accordingly. Is everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
Can I get
Agreed.
consensus?
Yes,
Consensus
Okay.
agreed.
So in order to document what I'll do, so the public knows, we will send out an email, get everybody's consensus that we can vote by email, and then we will send out the motion to accept the dates as noted that we just talked about. Everybody okay with that?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Any final discussion? Seeing none, I'll close the floor for new business, call for adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, motion for adjourned. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.